Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at Valparaiso University. Along with my co-chair, Christina Hearn, the whole MLK Day Planning Committee, and the sponsors that made this event possible, I welcome you to today's convocation. It is an honor to welcome you all as we remember the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. This legacy made the country better and touches all of our lives today. I, for example, a Mexican immigrant, were able to obtain a doctoral degree and this position because of the structures that he dismantled and the ones that he as his followers put in place. His legacy commands us to continue improving equity and inclusion in all arenas of society, so one day we achieve the promised land that he envisioned. His legacy also calls us to have a firm hope on the possibility of transformation. During wavering moments, when change seems impossible, we need to remember Dr. King's work. We must remind ourselves that he died with the conviction that every one of us had the necessary love and strength in their hearts to keep improving our community and not to despair when we face obstacles. Today, we need to attach ourselves to this conviction and keep working in maintaining and improving our rights. Only in that way, we will achieve Dr. King's dream of equal opportunity and human dignity. Again, in the name of the Planning Committee, I welcome you to this convocation. And now I pass it to Pastor Gay for invocation. Thank you.
In his last book, Martin Luther King Jr. wrote, "This is the great new problem of mankind. We have inherited a great world house in which we have to live together. Black and white, Easterner and Westerner, Gentile and Jew, Catholic and Protestant, Muslim and Hindu. Because we can never again live apart, we must learn somehow to live with each other in peace." The civil rights movement exemplified the way that people of different faiths and philosophies can not only live together, they can work together for justice and peace. Of course, we know that African American Christian churches were a main place of organizing for the movement. But King also drew inspiration from Mahatma Gandhi, a Hindu. The Jewish rabbi and scholar Abraham Joshua Heschel was a close friend and co-worker in the fight for justice, as was the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. Archbishop Yakovos of the Greek Orthodox Church was the only church leader of his rank to march at Selma. And of course, Malcolm X reminds us of the strong Muslim presence in the civil rights movement. Those are just the big names. We know that those who marched and sang and spoke for civil rights came from so many traditions, gathering together around the shared goals of justice and freedom for all. And the same is true today. And so we honor the interfaith nature of the work for justice by opening this convocation with prayers and words of wisdom from a few of the faith traditions who live together here at Valpo.
Hello everyone, my name is Lana Sirhan. I'm a sophomore biochemistry major here at Valpo, but most importantly, I come from the faith of Islam. Join me in my prayer as it begins. O God, Lord of all peace, bestower of good, and protector from all harm, indeed you have blessed us with the eyes to see, the ears to hear, mind to think, and the heart to love and feel. You have said in your holy book that our different colors, faiths, tongues, and tribes are only a means of glorifying your majesty in your creation. And you've also said in your holy book that in order to be of the good doers, we must give of what we love, no matter how constrained our hands are. Your most beloved Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him, said that we should never sleep if our neighbor isn't taken care of, and that we should only want for humanity what we want for our own selves. Let us use the faculties and the faith that you have blessed us with in a way that pleases you, in a way that forbids all harm and oppression, in a way that enjoins all that is good. Let us liberate the oppressed from the shackles of their oppressors, and let us see justice for what it is and stand by it no matter who or what stands for that justice. Let us liberate those that are oppressed in your holy land of Jerusalem. Let us liberate those Muslims, the Uyghur Muslims of China, who are being persecuted because of their faith. And most importantly, let us remember in our land, the very man, Dr. Martin Luther King, what he fought for, and let us liberate our black brothers and sisters from the shackles of their oppressors that they work so tirelessly to tackle. In your name we obey and trust, and in your word we follow. Amen. Amen.
Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Glassman. I'm a junior meteorology major, and I'm of the Jewish faith. Lord of peace, divine ruler, to whom peace belongs, master of peace, creator of all things, may it be thy to put an end to war and bloodshed on earth, and to spread a great and wonderful peace to the whole world, so that no nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Help us and save us all, and let us cling to the virtue of peace. Let there be truly great peace between every person and their fellow, and between husband and wife, and let there be no discord between people, even in their hearts. Let us never shame any person on earth, great or small. May it be granted unto us to fulfill thy commandment to love thy neighbor as thyself, with all our hearts and souls and bodies and possessions. God, who is peace, bless us with peace.
My name is Elias Anderson. I'm a junior music and mechanical engineering major, and I'm an Eastern Orthodox Christian. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. O heavenly King, O Comforter, the Spirit of truth, who art in all places and fillest all things, treasure your blessings and giver of life, come and abide in us and cleanse us from every stain, and save our souls, O gracious Lord. O holy God and Father of lights, who appeared to the prophet Elijah in a small, still voice, you sent your only begotten Son into the world to draw all of humanity into your kingdom of peace. When the raging crowd shouted for your Son to be crucified, he voluntarily ascended the cross and died for us, forsaking the way of anger and violence, and giving us your kingdom of peace. Look down upon us, your servants, and send your Spirit upon us, so that we would abandon rage, violence, murder, vengeance, false witness, racism, and hatred of all others. Grant that we would take on the image of your divine Son by adopting lives of peace for the life of the world. May your divine Spirit implant courage in us to come forth to hear your word and receive the gift of your Son, so that his grace would shine in us and we would present our lives of peace, reconciliation, and love as our gift to you. Instruct us and strengthen all who are in authority. Raise up for us leaders of strength and understanding, and grant to all of us the spirit of wisdom and the fear of God. O Lord, we hasten to you. Teach us to do your will, for you are our God. For with you is the fountain of life, and in your light shall we see light. Let your mercy be upon those who know you. For you alone are holy, together with your only begotten Son, who is the King of peace, and your all holy, good, and life-giving Spirit, now and ever, into the ages of ages. Amen.
Greetings. I'm Shia Kamra, and I'm majoring in health science as a freshman. I follow Hindu religion. On this occasion, I would like to read you a speech given by Swami Vivekananda on September 11, 1893 at the world's first Parliament of Religions. He said, "I am proud to belong to a religion which has taught the world both tolerance and universal acceptance. We believe not only in universal toleration, but we accept all religions as true. I am proud to belong to a nation which has sheltered the persecuted and the refugees of all religions and all nations of the earth. I am proud to tell you that we have gathered in our bosom the purest remnant of the Israelites who came to southern India and took refuge with us in the very year in which their holy temple was shattered to pieces by Roman tyranny. I am proud to belong to the religion which has sheltered and is still fostering the remnant of the grand Zoroastrian nation. I will quote to you, brethren, a few lines from a hymn which I remember to have repeated from my earliest boyhood, which is every day repeated by millions of human beings. As the different streams having their sources in different paths which men take through different tendencies, various though they appear, crooked or straight, all lead to thee." Thank you.
We want to thank each one of those students for their beautiful prayers. At this time, we ask that Loretta Sims, I don't know why I put Count, will come up next for our hymn. We ask that everyone stand for Lift Every Voice and Sing. And after that, she will follow up with a selection.
It's in your programs if you will follow in the program and sing with me. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmony. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Let's go to the last verse. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, lest our hearts shadow beneath thine hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land. Right now. Steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. They are new every morning. Oh, great is thy faithfulness. Oh, great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Oh God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassion, they fail not. As thou hast been, oh, thou forever will be. Great is thy faithfulness, oh, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. Everything I've needed, Lord, your hands have provided. Great is thy faithfulness, oh, great is thy faithfulness, oh, my. Great is thy faithfulness, oh God, and to me great is thy faithfulness, oh, great is thy faithfulness. Every time I wake up, that's a miracle. Every time I make up in the morning, brand new mercies I see. Everything I needed, the Lord's hands have provided. We may as well have a little church, is that all right? Great is thy faithfulness, oh my. Great is the Lord's faithfulness. Is the Lord faithful to anybody other than me? Great is thy faithfulness, Lord Jesus, oh God, and to me great is thy faithfulness, oh, great is the Lord's faithfulness. Every time I wake up in the morning, brand new mercies I see. Oh my God, everything I needed, his hand had provided. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is the Lord's faithfulness. Can you lift your hand and say yes? Yes, he is. Great is the Lord's faithfulness, oh my God, and to me.
Ms. Thomas, thank you so much. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Welcome all. Mr. Gordon, thank you for coming. I'd like to acknowledge everyone coming here, but I'd like to also particularly acknowledge Congressman Frank Mervan, who has come with us. Congressman, if you could stand, please. His Chief of Staff, Mark Lopez. State Representative Mike Andrade. Our past recipients of the MLK Award. Thank you so much for coming. If you could stand, please. My wife, Hilda. This is obviously a special day for all of us, But this is a day that sticks out for me in particular because when Dr. King was assassinated on April 4th, 1968, I was 10 years old, living in Toledo, Ohio, and it happened on a Thursday evening. I remember that next Sunday, I was an altar boy at St. Clement's Catholic Church in Toledo, and I was in the back getting ready for Mass, and I was talking to the priest. And I asked him, was Dr. King the second coming of Christ? And obviously he corrected me. But clearly he is an apostle, a disciple of God's only Son. And he not only knew the Word, he lived the Word. And we know how the world changed and how this country changed because he gave his life for his faith. I've been thinking about the theme of this day, transformed nonconformist, which Dr. King clearly was. And I was just thinking about the concept of those who have the courage to stand alone, despite what anybody else may think. How you kind of stand in the middle of a theater in the round where everybody's looking at you, some with awe, some with envy, some with shock, some with disdain, some actually with hate. But nevertheless, the man or woman who stands alone, they do so because of principle, because of faith in what they believe. And we've had several examples of those who stand alone here at Valparaiso University. O.P. Kretzmann, our most beloved president, who in 1951 met Inez Parker at the train station to desegregate this university. She was an African-American woman who was going to come here, and he could have sent a car to get her. Could have let her just come by herself. But he met her and carried her bags, and they purposely walked all the way from the train station to here in full public view. And don't you think there are a lot of folks peeking behind curtains as they're walking? Again, some with pride, awe, probably some with hate. But nevertheless, both O.P. and Inez stood alone because of what they believed in. I think of former theology professor Karl Lutz, who in the 1960s led a group of students by bus to the South to join the march from Selma to Montgomery. Thank God for their parents. There wasn't social media or texting, because if their parents had learned that their kids were going down to the South, do you think they would have let that happen if it was today? Probably not. But those students, not only as a group and individually, stood alone, as well as Professor Lutz. They didn't have to do that, but it was so important for them to be there. Think about Martin Luther. How he stood alone against the powerful Catholic Church to call out corruption. If it was not for the courage of Martin Luther King, we literally would not be here today. And there are other examples of people who've stood alone. But they're not all in our past. They're here today, and they're here going forward. They're in this audience. And the young men and women who are attending this university. They just don't know it yet. Will you stand alone for all the things that are happening in our country? Will you risk the wrath of those who may not agree with you? Right now, there are 19 states in our country that have passed voter suppression laws to deprive mostly persons of color and the poor from the right to vote. Will you stand alone against that? Particularly when those voter suppression laws are premised on the big lie that the 2020 race was stolen? Will you stand alone as COVID-19 just cuts and blazes a trail, an unfortunate trail against particularly communities of color? Because they don't have access to health care? Because they're the working men and women of this country who don't have the ability to do their job by Zoom. They got to go out there and do things in person, exposing themselves to this virulent disease. Will you stand alone for them? Will you stand alone as inflation makes staples almost unaffordable, where a gallon of milk almost is priced like a gourmet item, where the poor and persons of color in other parts of our community have to make really conscious, hard decisions of whether or not they're going to be able to feed their kids? Will you stand alone against that? Will you stand alone as our country is beleaguered by political division? And I don't care what party you're on, but the bottom line is, if you think we're a united country, we're not. We're so polarized as it is. Will you stand alone and make a statement about that? To try to reach out and talk with somebody who doesn't agree with you, but reach out and see if there's more in common than there isn't. That takes a lot of courage, and I believe that's what Dr. King was talking about. Now, some of you students, you may be engineers, you may be accountants, you may be nurses, and you may think, how am I going to, in my career, stand alone? We all do what we can within our respective lives. But remember this: as a graduate of this university, if we do our job right, you are servant leaders, more than just simply an engineer, an accountant, a CPA, a nurse practitioner, or an English teacher. You are individuals that hopefully who understand that the value of your career and your life is measured more than how many zeros are in your paycheck. Rather, it's measured by how you pay it back, how you pay it forward. Where when you wake up every day, there are two questions you should ask yourself every morning. First, what can I do to make myself better? And second of all, and more importantly, what can I do to make somebody else's life better? We all have our roles in lives, and many of you will have families, and you'll be supporting them, and you'll decide to what extent you can actually exercise your faith, practice. But I ask you, just like Martin Luther King, just don't read the word, don't understand the word, just don't understand the word, but make it real by putting into practice. Because faith without practice is meaningless. I respectfully submit. And Dr. King put it so much into practice that he actually lost his life for that. So this is that day where we think about whether we all can be transformed nonconformists. It's hard to do. It's easy to say that we can all do that. But I also believe that if we're going to stand together, we have to first stand alone. Because as Dr. King said, sometimes what happens is you get into a herd, and a herd goes a certain direction that you weren't even anticipating. And you have to have the courage or convictions to break away from the herd if it's not meeting your vision and principle and idea of what is right and what is wrong. We stand together at Valparaiso University because, hopefully, most importantly, each and every one of you can stand alone and work the courage of your convictions. I have no doubt that's going to be the case, given what I've seen in the last year as your president. So again, thank you for this day. Angela, Christina, thank you for a wonderful program. You've made his word real. Let this not just be one day a year, though, that we celebrate the idea of Martin Luther King. It would do a dishonor to him if it just ends today. It's got to be 365 days in various ways, right? It's both the big things and the little things. Talk about standing alone. Talking about the courage or conviction. This is something I've talked about, and you may get sick of me talking about it, but it's kind of symbolic. It's not enough, but it's important. Every time you walk past homeless Jesus on that bench out there, acknowledge him, touch him, comfort the nail wounds in his feet. Recognize again that there are those in this country who are less fortunate than you, and how lucky you are to be getting a college education that hopefully will empower you to help all the homeless Jesuses in this country. If we can teach you that, in addition to everything else we teach you, we will have done our job, and you will be the great men and women who your predecessors were, who walked these grounds. God love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, President Padilla. Since 1995, Valparaiso University has presented its Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Award to individuals and groups within our community who have dedicated themselves to the intentional work of creating lasting change on campus and within the greater Valparaiso University community at large. These individuals understand that simply believing in equality is not enough to undo the pervasive and hegemonic nature of decades of systematic oppression. Rather, there's a need for action. The individuals awarded the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Award have answered this call to action and have made significant contributions to the creation of an environment where diversity, inclusion, and belonging are accepted, respected, and most importantly, are part of the overall organizational infrastructure. You can find the names of previous award winners in your programs. And as President Padilla has already said, and I'm sorry, I know previous award winners, you didn't think this was going to be like a Olympic exercise, but some of these individuals, as we know, are here today, and I'm going to ask just one more time if you would stand again for recognition. Thank you, previous recipients. I will now ask President Jose Padilla to come to the podium once again and to award this year's recipient.
Thank you, Christina. This year's recipient is Dr. Richard Sevier. Richard Sevier is an associate professor and chair of the English department in Valparaiso. Born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and raised in Miami, Florida, Dr. Sevier is a graduate of Florida A&M University, where he earned his bachelor's degree in English and French. He earned his PhD in medieval literature from Purdue University. Before coming to Valpo, Dr. Sevier worked at Centenary University in Hackettstown, New Jersey. There, he founded and directed the Writing Collaboratory, the university's writing center, as well as the university honors program. Since coming to Valpo, Dr. Sevier teaches medieval literature and professional writing. His area of research is on medieval friendship and masculinity in our 13th literature and Old French romance. He's an associate editor of the scholarly journal Arthuriania. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Dr. Sevier is a firm believer that the faculty role extends beyond the classroom and that we can inspire and touch students' lives when we engage with them in extracurricular activities. For this reason, he is currently the faculty advisor for the multicultural sorority Sigma Lambda Gamma and faculty advisor for Kappa Alpha Psi, the only historically black fraternity on Valpo's campus. Previously, he served as the faculty advisor to the Black Student Organization and co-advisor of Sigma Tau Delta English Honor Society. Beside his academic involvement, Dr. Severe is an example of service to the larger Valparaiso community. Dr. Severe dedicated countless hours to build houses for families in need as part of the Project Neighbors, and he continues to support this organization as a board member. He also serves on the board of directors of the Valparaiso International Center, where he promotes the appreciation of world cultures in the city of Valparaiso. For more than 5 years, Dr. Severe has volunteered as a mentor and positive role model for underrepresented children, first as part of the Lunch Buddy program in Valparaiso elementary schools, and now as part of the Boys to Men mentoring program at the Thomas Jefferson Middle School. In his free time, he enjoys working out at the local YMCA and is a French horn player in Windiana, the Professional Wind Orchestra, and the Valparaiso Community Band. Please join me in thanking Dr. Severe for his service to our community and recognizing his dedication to continuing Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy of servant leadership.
Thank you, President Padilla and the members of the MLK committee. I'm grateful, I'm humbled, and most importantly, I'm hopeful. I was inspired to write my brief remarks for today during a moment last Friday afternoon, as 3 young black men sat in my office. They were eating snacks, talking about the recent development in their lives. They were ragging on each other, but mainly ragging on me because of what I was wearing that day. It's all right. These conversations and impromptu gatherings are weekly occurrences for me. I never know when they will occur. Actually, I do know when they occur. It's when I'm at my busiest. But nonetheless, they're always welcome and life-giving. I am hopeful. Because of these unplanned distractions and candid dialogue with some of Valpo's best and brightest, I'm thankful and I'm hopeful. For the times together where we commiserate about our infinite and the cruel world that awaits us right outside the doors of the Arts and Science Building, I am hopeful. For these brief opportunities together where we can reclaim our histories, let loose, and be our authentic selves, I am hopeful. For dreams shared and for dreams deferred, I am hopeful. For the opportunity to be present for and inspired by our university's underrepresented population, who, despite the number of challenges they encounter, march onward and upward towards greatness. I'm hopeful. To those students, thank you for this honor, and thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey. May you always remain steadfast and always hopeful. Thank you.
Dr. Severe, we thank you for your remarks of hope, right? In this environment, we know that there needs to be hope. We definitely have not arrived to where we need to be as an institution, as a nation, but we're hopeful. At this time, I will ask that students of the Office of Multicultural Programs come forth for a reading that they will be reading and that they have felt within their hearts for you today.
Dr. King taught us the importance of using our voices. If the power of life and death is in the tongue, then the voice must be able to access eternity. The voices carry the pain of the past, the pride and reality of the present, and the hope of transformation for the future. Only our words can relate a truth that lives past generations of dehumanization, stereotypes, isolation, into a spiritual place of restoration and accountability. It is hope that carried the hearts of a nation that allowed the election of the first woman of color VP, Vice President Kamala Harris. It was a Cesar Chavez that used his voice to say, "Si se puede," to chip away at an unfair labor system that took advantage of the most vulnerable people. It was with her voice that Lorraine Hansberry answered the proactive question asked by Langston Hughes, "What happens to a dream deferred?" in her play Raisin in the Sun. Likewise, it was hope that allowed poet Amanda Gorman to utter in her iconic inaugural poem, "The Hill We Climb." If we word mercy with might, might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. Yes, indeed, the voice has the power to change the world we live in. But first, we must find our voice. Where do we find our voices, you may ask? We find our voices by listening to the great choir of civil rights leaders past and present, as well as everyday people that reminds us of the benefits of collective action, who stand upon the principles of true democracy amidst the ever-present attempts at voter suppression. We are reminded that quality health care, fair housing, accessible education, and recognition of dignity and worth of all people is the right for all. We find our voice in the literature that tells the truth about marginalized individuals in our society. Lastly, we find our voices on days like today, when we have the opportunity to educate our ignorance, encourage our timidity, and strengthen our resolve by adequately recalling the legacy of Dr. King. That demands freedom from the past and into our future. Listen to the director of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. today.
Systematic oppression has plagued our country since the beginning. Before a Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, our country shaped the most divisive narrative. Who was human and who was chattel was created for the purpose of economic gain, and the haves and the have-nots were reaffirmed in our founding documents. Dr. King said, "The problems of racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power. People of color are still underrepresented in our bodies of government, healthcare systems, school leadership structures, and in economic holdings. In the time of COVID-19, we have seen firsthand the ramifications of these health disparities, as well as a widening of the wealth gap. This lack of diversity and representation has led to the creation of a society in which fragility thrives and accountability is deemed a threat." Dr. King warned us that racism can well be that corrosive evil that will bring down the curtain on Western civilization. We cannot wait to seek solutions to these issues. In a nation where people are still trying to prove their humanity by requiring equality and inclusivity as opposed to symbolic justice and hashtag advocacy for likes and commercial gain, we must require action, lasting infrastructure, and honest narrative.
There are many reasons why we must reclaim history in order to adhere to the true dreams of Dr. King. In order for there to be economic equity, fair wages, and an end to social, cultural, and institutional oppression, we must take action. One of the scariest aspects of living in this nation is the fact that one can end up not being able to feed themselves despite working 40 hours a week. While the cost of living has dramatically increased, the national minimum wage has not. Dr. King reminds us that it is a crime for people to live in this rich nation and receive starvation wages. Toward the end of his life, Dr. King started to speak out on a manner in which we treat our poor. The correlation between race and poverty is extremely concerning. Dr. King says, "It is a cruel jest to say a bootless man that ought to lift himself up by his own bootstraps." As a nation, we have become guilty of adhering to the capitalist myth of meritocracy. Daily, we ignore the needs of the poor while giving grace and resources to the greedy. But right before Dr. King was assassinated more than 50 years ago, he gave this sober reminder. So often, we overlook the work and the significance of those who are not in professional jobs, of those who are not in the so-called big jobs. But let me tell you tonight that wherever you are engaged in work that serves humanity and is for the building of humanity, it has dignity and it has worth. No longer can we allow the exploitation and the marginalization of the working class due to the misguided beliefs that these individuals' contributions are insignificant and undeserving of respect.
The urgency for truth in peaceful people has never had as high of demand as it does in our contemporary context. Violence and war seem to have normalized their terror in our current climate. It was once said that in war, truth is the first casualty. As the truth is traded for fear, and fear is traded for the love of power, Dr. King's words ring even louder. It is no longer a choice between violence and nonviolence. It is either nonviolence or non-existence. I believe King is correct. We are consumed by political violence both nationally and locally, and it has perpetuated and affirmed division. In a society in which the status quo narrative of oppression has been deemed sufficient for so long, declarations of truth and accountability are needed more than ever. Yet, these truths must be met with acceptance as opposed to violence. Yet, if we think carefully and analyze our situation, we recognize counter-life gun laws, the continued lack of protection and acknowledgement of gender and race-based violence, and the depletion of healthcare and education systems have created a society in which physical, emotional, and psychological violence are inevitable. We, as a society, cannot wait for the next travesty to temporarily stir up conversation and outrage to talk about an everlasting peace. The time is now to commit to continuous actions towards transformative change.
Dr. King begs us to remember Romans 12:2 today. As the scripture reads, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by renewing your mind." Today, we must make the conscious decision to educate our ignorance and that of those around us. No longer can we stay quiet when faced with pervasive narratives of oppression ingrained within our institutions. The time for societal acceptance of stereotypes and generalizations that justify dehumanization for the purpose of creating law and order for the so-called greater good can no longer go unquestioned. On the surface, adherence to the majority and status quo is easy. It allows us not to create waves. In fact, at times we are seemingly rewarded with the continuation of the very narrative that oppresses those around us. Thus is it easy for us who have never been oppressed to have the privilege of benefiting from exclusionary practices of our nation to be still at such a time as this. But for those who see their children getting the short end of the stick in a flawed education system, when families and communities grieve at the loss of another individual due to unregulated guns or an uncontained pandemic, when the poverty and unemployment rate amongst minoritized communities continue to rise, when the individual seeking asylum is given no refuge, but rather criminalized, when the rich business owner is given yet another tax break, or struggling low-income families fear for eviction, when a student struggles to pay for college, all while experiencing the pain and microaggressions masked in academic freedom, when the thought of imminent danger is always present depending on one's gender or race, then you will understand why. Why we can no longer be silent, nor let others continue to define our history. Similar to Dr. King, it is easy to become frustrated with contemporary social and political moderates that tell us to wait and be patient and trust the process. But the process has failed us too many times and has left us maligned, disenfranchised in this American context. The call today is for each of you to not only find your voice, but to use it. Whether it's writing, singing, speaking, drawing, recording, tweeting, blogging, whatever you find your voice in, from today on out, you must use your voice.
To speak truth to power.
You must use your voice.
To give hope to the hopeless.
You must use your voice.
To call out oppressive forces.
You must use your voice.
To protect those who can't not protect themselves.
To reshape the narrative of history.
For like Dr. King said,
300 years of humiliation, abuse,
and deprivation cannot be expected to find voice in a whisper. We are loudly and diligently speaking against the narratives of oppression. We have found a way to use our voices to reclaim history so that Dr. King's dream may be achieved. We cannot wait for you to do the same.
Wow. Thank you to our student leaders who led that reading, and what a powerful reading it was. Thank you so much. We realized that there is a typo in your program. Your program calls for a performance by Reginald Hogan and Company. That should actually be a performance by Loretta Timms, sorry.
This song was performed by Mahalia Jackson at Martin Luther King's funeral. Simply says, "Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on and let me stand." Years ago, Thomas Dorsey wrote the song. After being out of town, his wife had a baby and she died during childbirth. He rushed to the hospital, and when he got there, he realized that the child was gone too. And he began to write this, pen music and write the words to this song that simply says, "Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I'm so tired, I'm weak, Lord, I'm worn through the storms, through the night. Lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me on when my way grows dim. Precious Lord, oh Lord, I need you, Jesus, to linger near when my light is almost need you to lead me. I need you to lead me home. Ain't no harm to moan. The devil don't know what you're saying. At the river, Lord Jesus, here I stand. Got my feet, Lord. Hold my hand. I don't know about you, but I need the Lord to take my hand. Precious, precious Lord, and I need you to lead me. I need you to lead me. I need you to lead me, lead me, lead me, lead me home. Hallelujah.
So, part of me is up here and the row needs to be formal, but I'm not going to say thank you, Loretta, because that's weird to me. So thank you, Aunt Ray Ray. Thank you. Thank you. At this time, sorry, I keep forgetting to take this mask off. At this time, our program calls for the introduction of our speaker. And the individual who will introduce our speaker is none other than a very diligent student leader on our campus. He has shown, I've only known him for about maybe a couple of months, but in that time I've gotten to know him. I've seen his thrive for justice, his passion for social justice, and so I'm going to ask that junior business student Isaiah Roach come and introduce our speaker.
Thank you for the interesting introduction. Emmy Award-winning broadcaster Ed Gordon is known for his stellar interactions with newsmakers from the world of politics, entertainment, and sports. Mr. Gordon's impressive portfolio includes interviews with newsmakers such as Presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, Academy Award winners Jamie Foxx and Halle Berry, Nation of Islam leader Minister Louis Farrakhan, actor Idris Elba, the late musician Michael Jackson, and one of my all-time personal favorites, the late rapper Tupac Shakur. Mr. Gordon is also the president of Ed Gordon Media, a multi-service media production company. The production company produces Right Now with Ed Gordon, which provides daily commentaries for radio stations across the country. He also hosts a nationally syndicated radio program, Weekend with Ed Gordon. The 2-hour program is a nationally syndicated radio program with a mix of talk, information, entertainment, and music. Gordon is also featured on the Steve Harvey Morning Show, where he gives his perspective on current national headlines and the state of Black America. Born in Detroit, Michigan to parents Ed Gordon Jr. and Jimmy Gordon, Ed was always taught the importance of education, as both of his parents were employed by the Detroit public school system. His father was also an athlete. He won a gold medal in the long jump in the 1932 Summer Olympic Games in Los Angeles, California. Ed is no stranger to activism, as his dad was a collegiate athlete at the University of Iowa and was adamant about not receiving second-class treatment from any establishments just due to the color of his skin. Ed attended the famous Cass Technical High School, which is no stranger to notable alum, as the list includes Big Sean, Diana Ross, Tom Seaborn, Tony Neal, and David Allen Greer, to name a few. After graduating from Cass Tech, Ed decided to stay in the state of Michigan and attended Western Michigan University, where he majored in communications and political science. After graduating from Western Michigan University, Ed did briefly consider going to law school, but instead opted for a career in media. He started his career as an unpaid intern at Detroit's public television station, WTVS. After that, he worked as a host of the Detroit Black Journal, a weekly talk show host. Later on, Ed worked for BET as a freelance writer before it was ever known as the BET that we know today. BET has long been praised for its increasingly for providing people with black entertainment and a space for black individuals to tell their stories, as well as provide news for those. Ed has always been critical of the shortcomings of network television news. Walk into any other newsroom, he told the Detroit Free Press, part of what they're missing is the diversity. It's still an all-white, male-oriented world. BET's mission is to provide another perspective on national and international events, one that reflects the black American point of view. When African Americans rioted in Los Angeles in 1991, BET aired a special with Gordon as his host entitled Black Men Speak Out, The Aftermath, which featured blunt opinions on social conditions that led to the uprising. Mr. Gordon also interviewed President George W. Bush about the situation in Los Angeles. In that story, Mr. Gordon noted in the Detroit Free Press, we tried to go a little bit deeper than the mainstream media did and tried to provide us perspective of what black African Americans go through on a day-to-day basis in Los Angeles. In 2020, Gordon authored his first book, Conversations in Black, where he interviewed over 40 leaders and influencers for a virtual conversation about the state of black America. In the book, he offers sage wisdom for navigating race in a radically divisive America, as well as a new narrative on what he feels the future of black leadership should look like and how he feels we should get there. He does this with the help of his team of intellectuals, Maxine Waters, Charlemagne the God, Stacey Abrams, Iyanla Van Zant, and a fellow Detroit native, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. Aside from his own media ventures, Mr. Gordon has continued to be at the forefront of news. He conducted one-on-one interviews with President Barack Obama during his historic presidential run. He has covered many of the world's most defining events throughout his career, from the historic 2008 U.S. presidential election, to the freedom of South Africa's Nelson Mandela, to the beating of Rodney King, to the upheavals in Haiti and Cuba. He also provided comprehensive coverage and up-to-the-minute reports on many other domestic and international events, including the tragic 9/11 attacks on America. In addition to receiving an Emmy for his work, Mr. Gordon is a recipient of many other awards recognizing his talent and professionalism, including the NAACP Image Award and the prestigious Journalist of the Year Award from the National Association of Black Journalists. He has also been tasked with a job that bears zero rewards, but is important, which is keeping my uncle in line and on his toes. Without further ado, please help me in welcoming a longtime family friend, the liaison of information for the black community, and an all-around genuinely good person, Ed Gordon III.
Couple of quick notes. It's cold in here. Note number one. Number two, I have done this long enough to understand when you are at the end of the program, understand your time. So we won't keep you here too very long. Let me say thank you, Dr. Padilla, for the invitation. Thank you all. Congratulations on the honor. I have been doing this for some time now, and I have been humbled by years and years of invitations to gatherings like this. And I want to tell you that I'm not here to deliver a speech, because I think it would be foolish for someone like myself to try to deliver a speech about a man who was one of the great speech givers of the 20th century. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about the importance of Dr. King, his legacy, and where we sit today. You know, we continue to salute his contributions and to celebrate his life, and we should. What an extraordinary man he was. You know, that entire generation was extraordinary. I think about the idea when they said they'd rather die on their feet than live on their knees. That's an extraordinary thing to think about. to think about that there was actually a time in the not too distant past that we had to really think about whether or not we were willing to stand up and put our lives on the line to do just the everyday things, the normal things, the natural things. What I'm most pleased with today, quite frankly, is the audience makeup that I see. Often when I do these, the room is about 90% black. It's almost like preaching to the choir because unfortunately in America, oftentimes when we talk about Dr. King or what is called Black history, people assume that that's only for black folks. But that isn't the case. And so I appreciate all of our white brothers and sisters and other ethnic makeups that are here today, because really Dr. King spoke to what the ideal of America is, the idea of this melting pot that we haven't found yet. You see, a melting pot is not really what America is, because if you think about a melting pot, that blends everything together. I contend that Dr. King wanted us to see our differences and appreciate them and understand that that's what makes this country great. But we shouldn't castigate those who are different than we are. So while I say that there are so many others who are deserving of credit, who made the idea and the trek to try to bring reality of equality to this nation, but Dr. King is the most recognized. But I will say this, I would be disingenuous if I didn't say that the tenets of what Dr. King pushed today are not in the fore of this nation right now. We are in an ugly and a tenuous time. We are in a time of division that in my lifetime I can't remember. That isn't to say that it's the worst time, but as a child I don't remember the riots of 1968 in a way that I should. I remember being picked up from school early. My father came to get me. I remember the tanks going down the street, but I didn't know what was going on. I didn't remember the killing of Dr. King as an 8-year-old. What I do remember is my mother crying uncontrollably that day, and my father trying to explain to me why she was crying uncontrollably. And I knew who Dr. King was, but I didn't understand what he was fighting for at that time. I understood that African Americans in this country weren't equal, but that didn't resonate to me yet in the way I understood some time ago. And for those of you who are students here, the idea of Dr. King is really something that you fully can't understand or touch. And I understand that. It was so long ago. You know, I try to remind myself that I was born in 1960, so by the time I was 20, it was 1980. When someone said to me something happened in 1940, I thought, oh, what do I care about that? That was so long ago. So I understand the disconnect that some of you may have, but as you grow older, you start to understand the importance of history and those who've come before. I would imagine meeting Dr. King, who was killed when, as I said, I was 7 and a few months away from the old age of 8 when he was killed. And I think about the questions that must have been to meet this man. I can only liken to when I met Nelson Mandela. There are some extraordinary people in this world. I think Dr. King was that, as I could feel the way Nelson Mandela was. But let us understand that in order for us to understand Dr. King, we have to believe that we should salute him more than just once a year. Take a look at your timeline today. You'll see pictures of him and quotes of him. And then take a look at your timeline tomorrow and next week and the week after that. And ask yourself, do we really live in a nation that believes in what Dr. King talked about? Or is it just what you do today to get likes on your page? We have to understand how important it is for this nation, particularly today, in a tenuous time, to grapple with what Dr. King said and to decide whether or not we really want that. I would respectfully suggest this. Today's theme, reclaiming a dream, I don't agree with. You see, the great vision of a society that treats all as equal is still a dream. We never lost that dream. So there's no need to reclaim it. If you go to the dictionary, it says reclaim, retrieve or recover something previously lost, given or paid, obtained, the return of. But we never lost that dream. We still thrived to make it real. I would say that we need to replace that word with another R word. And that R word would be realize. It is time for this nation to realize that dream. You see, if we don't realize that dream, all of this will be for naught. Dr. King suggested that the dream would come true, that he wanted to be able to see his children reach equality. So think about this. We need Dr. King's dream to become a reality, but as we see, that will take more work, especially when there are those who are working to see America stay asleep in hopes that what we see as this dream will stay just that. And there are those who want to take us back to the days when the dream, quite frankly, was a nightmare for many in this country. You see, if we keep it where it is, chasing the dream, if that remains the focus, that allows for the promise of betterment to be enough. It allows prejudice to continue to wear the mask that we have tried to get rid of. It does not allow for convalescence. Let me show you what I mean. We're in the playoff season. How many football fans here? So if you think about it, we're all geared up. Super Bowl is coming. So let's take a look at the NFL. After making Colin Kaepernick a pariah, the league was forced to deal with race. They placed Black Lives Matter logos in the end zones and slogans on the back of helmets. They donated millions of dollars, a drop in the bucket for a multi-billion-dollar behemoth. But they donated millions of dollars to black causes. Oh yeah, and I forgot, the halftime show, Snoop, Dr. Dre, Mary J. Blige, Kendrick Lamar, all these wonderful black entertainers. Yet, with 32 teams, there is only one black head coach, in spite of a rule that was instituted 20 years ago to promote the hiring of minorities for these positions. Think about what that means. What about corporations? The companies that have given hundreds of millions of dollars to help black causes since the murder of George Floyd. That every year spend millions of dollars to air commercials right around this time. You've seen them. Dr. King's face comes up from black. A candle is lit, a choir sings behind it, and they say the dream is still alive. They celebrate Dr. King, yet the landscape of opportunities for blacks at the highest levels in these same corporations are actually declining. There are fewer black CEOs at Fortune 500 companies today than a decade ago. And what about the duplicitous nature of politicians who praise King's protege, John Lewis, after his death for all that he stood for, yet they refuse to pass voting rights legislations that bear his name? Legislation that would help secure what King himself fought for. Remember, the infamous Bloody Sunday March was about voting rights. Should we really still have a dream today simply to have the right to vote? Listen to these words spoken by Dr. King in 1957. And so our most urgent request to the President of the United States and every member of Congress is to give us the right to vote. That was in 1957. These words are being uttered on Capitol Hill today. Think about 1957 and police reform, 1957 and the idea of the fair housing that was not available to African Americans, women, other people of color. These fights have been going on for decades. So one has to ask oneself, are we really ready to live King's dream beyond the celebration of the day? I would sadly say no, we are not. During these times, many raise the question, what would King do? I say that question is really no longer relevant. Dr. King has been gone now for 54 years, longer than most have been alive who sit in this room. No, there is another question that needs to be asked, and that is, what will you do? When that question is proffered, many say, whatever you need, I'm down for the cause. The response is the same as it was in the 1960s, but much like most, you're simply down with voice and not action. Most did not march with King. Most were afraid to sacrifice or simply didn't see the need to give up anything. There were exceptions. Many of you have heard of the Montgomery bus boycott that lasted more than a year. Blacks in Montgomery, Alabama, and those who supported them stayed off of city buses in that Alabama city, and by extension, the nation saw a change in the public transportation system. But that was unusual. More often than not, it was a handful of folks who fought for the many, and that remains the case today. Vice President Harris said today, we must not be complacent or complicit. So one has to ask yourself, what are you willing to do? We can't just stand by and watch the rollback of the civil rights gains that so many gave their lives for, and that has become cliche today. People gave their lives for the right to vote. We kind of write that off. But think about the idea of actually finding something that you were willing to die for. That's what that generation did. So are you really ready to forego the NFL, particularly if your team makes the playoffs? Will you boycott your favorite company if they're not doing the right thing? Would you really pass on those new Jordans or end a subscription to your favorite streaming service, or pass on a new Mercedes-Benz if you can in fact afford one? Would you really sacrifice those things? How involved would you really be willing to be? Would you be willing to run for office? What demands are you putting on elected officials? Would you run for office in lieu of a C-suite job? Would you give up money that you could make in the private corporation in order to make your city, your state, your country better? These are questions that we have to start asking ourselves. And there is one very important question that most of us don't like to ask ourselves. How willing are you to really look in the mirror and ask yourself who you are? How many of you are here because you have to be? How many of you are here because someone suggested, let's go? How many of you are here with the idea that I want to learn more about Dr. King and what he stood for? And it's okay, particularly at a very young age, to say, I'm just here because I have to be. I'm just here because I get class credit. I'm just here because I had nothing else to do. I'm just here because my friends are here. That's okay. I understand it. I was there. Even though I'm almost completely gray now. I'm not so old that I don't remember those days. I get it. But as you grow, one will hope your wisdom will grow. And the wisdom to be the best our nation can be can only be real if all of us have opportunity and chance. Think about all that your life would not be if women didn't have the opportunity to be equal. Think about what you would not be if people of color didn't have an opportunity to be equal. And I'm talking about from the enjoyment side of sports and entertainment to inventions that many of you may not know a person of color or a woman invented. There are so many things that we don't think about that we have to start. We have to find new narratives. The old narratives have gotten us to this point. The question is, how much further can we go? Even Dr. King's son, Martin III, called for people to refrain from celebrating this year until legislation for voting rights has passed. We can't show up just for photo opportunities when the need for black faces is there. There has to be something behind it. I got on a number of my colleagues when they found their way to the White House, and that's a heady invitation. No one wants to turn down an invite to the White House. But President Biden invited them to stand with him when he thought Build Back Better was going to become law. And yet he had not pushed the voting rights legislation as he promised a group that ushered him into office, because had it not been for African American voters, we would have seen Trump point 2. I'll let you sit with that a moment. On the gridiron, in corporate suites, in the voting booth, we must know our worth and demand that we be given the respect and opportunities we deserve. We are in a tenuous time. In some cases, we are facing a regression of the gains that Dr. King and others fought for. We owe them more than just dreaming. We owe them action. We owe them getting up and doing. We owe them more than just this day. We owe them more than just being able to say, oh, Dr. King, that's the guy that dreamed. If you only know his I Have a Dream speech, do yourself a favor. Find more of his writings and his speeches. He was an extraordinary thinker. He wasn't a dreamer. He was a doer, a thinker. Do yourself that favor. Many of the tried and true tactics that generations have used are still vital. Marching and boycotts, they're useful today. And yet some of those tactics have lost their effectiveness. The goal now is to determine what should be continued and what should be retired. No matter, additional narratives, new ways are needed to find our way to reality. Our nation, and yes, even our community in many cases, became too complacent. We became too enamored with the gains made in America. America moved the racial needle toward the middle fairly quickly. The mistake was to believe that everyone moved with it, and that there was no chance that needle would move backwards. We've allowed gains to be mistaken for completion. Along the way, many in Black America fell asleep and began dreaming once again. We as a nation cannot afford to continue to dream. Dreaming allows you to see the world as you want it, not as it is. You don't have to agree politically with one side or another, but to try to whitewash what happened January 6th of 2021 is foolish. That was real. I don't care what side of the political fence you sit, whether you want a tax cut or not. What this nation cannot allow is for us to suggest that that was not a violent insurrection. It was. It was not simply people coming to voice disapproval. That was an attempted overthrow of an election. Is that what we want to believe America is becoming? I am not one of those who has believed in the Hollywood version of America. America is not perfect. She never has been. But what I do know is without truth, America will be as ugly as any other nation that we rail against for being wrong. We have to be strong enough to stand up and say, this is reality. So what Donald Trump and the MAGA followers have done for us all is startled this nation awake. Rudely awakened by some, but we now have seen that the dream was not as closely realized as many believed, and that rapid racism and rampant racism is not a thing of the past. So now that we are awake, dealing with the reality of the need of police reform, protection of the Voting Rights Act, we see the continued racism and prejudice faced by people of color and women. Let me quote another orator who guided us by words for decades. His was usually set to music. For you R&B fans, you know the great philosopher Charlie Wilson. For you youngsters who love R&B, you know him as Uncle Charlie. But before he was anyone's uncle, he was a member of the Gap Band. And they had a hit in 1980 called Nothing Comes to Sleepers But a Dream. And it's so apropos. Here are some of the lyrics. With the sunshine comes the dawning of a day. Still another dream has come and slipped away. Scattered visions of the things you want to be make you open up your mind and try to see how to make dreams come true. Oh, life is but a dream. Nothing comes to sleepers but a dream. And that is simply a way of saying that you cannot just sit. You must wake up and act and react and be willing to do what is needed. We like to talk about being woke in today's society. So let's get to that. You need to decide what you can do to make things better. Register voters, demand action from leaders, involve yourself in state and local elections. Decide your role in this reality because we all must be involved. That's the new narrative. The march to reality needs people from all corners. We need you to do more than just post on Instagram and figure, I checked my box. It's not enough. We all can contribute. I know not everyone is an activist, but everyone has something to give. I say this. If you have time, give of your time. If you have money, give some cash. If you're wise, lend your wisdom. If you only have complaints, then be kind and give us the courtesy of being quiet while you get out of the way. And please remember this. I'll be honest with you. I've been doing this for so long. I used to call it, and some of you won't know who this, I used to call it the Phil Donahue syndrome. Then it moved to the Oprah Winfrey syndrome. And I don't know who the hell to call it now because it's so crazy on daytime TV now. But often we get caught up in moments. And we come here and we applaud politely when a line is said that either is an applause line or you really agree with, and you say, and then you leave. And the thing you applauded for is no longer important. And so I say to you, those of you who are of color, or of the female persuasion, we all must understand reality right now, and that we are on the precipice of change, and it isn't necessarily positive change. For white brothers and sisters who feel like that's not touching me right now, and I get it, sometimes we need something to touch us, to move us. I suggest this to you. Take a look at some of the things that are touching you now that are negative, and see if they touch the black community first. See if they touched women first. See if they start to creep your way. Because the truth of the matter is, when it gets ugly, eventually it gets ugly for all. I think about Columbine High School. Again, you may have read about this if you're young enough. But that's when ugly school violence, which has become commonplace today, reached the suburbs. But decades before that, it was in the inner city, and it was a black problem. And then it became a white problem because suburban kids started shooting one another. Ugliness will find you. Understand, it's better to catch it early. So I say this in closing. Remember, there's no need to reclaim the dream it never left. Let's vow to do all we can to realize the dream, and in that quest, let us no longer ask, what will King do? His dues were paid a long time ago. In his honor, let's begin today, getting to that new question, what will I do? And then answer it, not just in word, but in action. So I would ask you to please ask yourself, what was Dr. King to this nation? What did he give to this country and to me? For those of you who, again, only know him by virtue of the commercials and the one time we celebrate him, do yourself a favor. Delve into his life. See what he was asking this nation to become. And try to find something that resonates with you. Try to see, as he did, if you can become bigger than yourself, bigger than this singular problem, bigger than the nation. Dr. King touched the world. There is someone in this audience, and I'm not being trite, who has the ability to touch more than themselves or their inner circle. But sometimes that's lost because we don't believe we have it. So I hope that this day proves more than just a nod to Dr. King and a salute. I hope it is a way for you to find your own dream and then bring it to reality. Thank you very much.
It is my hope that you were not merely spectators today, but that you listened and your spirit was compelled to action. Thank you, Mr. Gordon, for speaking truth to power and providing us with a narrative that reminds us of the true legacy of Dr. King. As we get ready to come to a conclusion, I ask that Ryan escort Mr. Gordon to the meet and greet that will be happening in the Brown and Gold Room of the Howard Union in just a few moments. And I am not, oh, Ryan is coming. Perfect, thank you. There will be light refreshments, and Mr. Gordon will be signing copies of his book, Conversations in Black, on power, politics, and leadership. Books are available for purchase in the University Bookstore, which is located on the first floor of the Howard Union. As we end today, I would be remiss if I did not thank the many sponsors and behind-the-scenes coordinators that make days like this possible. While Dr. Vidal Rodriguez and I are sitting on stage as the co-chairs of this event, it took a truly dedicated team to pull off the day. First and foremost, I would like to thank and acknowledge the administration of the university. Their stated commitment to social justice allows for days like this to go forth. Thank you to our president, President Padilla, to our provost, Dr. Eric Johnson. Thank you. Through their leadership, we will continue to have support for this day, and we thank them for that so very much. There are also numerous donors whose financial backing provided us with the necessary resources to make this day a success. We want to thank our external sponsors. First and foremost, we want to thank Thorgan Industries. We want to thank the Porter County Community Foundation, as well as the Johnson family. We also have departments right here on campus who gave to ensure that today was a success. We want to thank the Valparaiso University Counseling Center, Valpo Dining by Parkhurst, the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, the Office of Multicultural Programs, and the Access and Accommodations Resource Center. Thank you for making this day possible. For those who don't know, Convocation is not only an event, is not the only event that happens for us here on campus on MLK Day. We want to thank all of our speakers during this morning's focus sessions. A special thank you to all of those volunteers who moderated sessions. Thank you to our anchor speakers. A special thank you to those who ran the K-8 session. Like, I witnessed a little bit of that, and the kids were very active, but they handled it like champs. So thank you to them. Likewise, we want to thank the Valparaiso University Integrated Marketing Department for their help with advertisements in today's programs. We want to thank you, Deb, and the University Chapel staff. Additionally, I want to thank the true rock stars of the day, the 2022 MLK Planning Committee. Planning Committee, I ask that you stand at this time. We couldn't have done this without you, so please stand. I thank every speaker who had a part in today's Convocation program. I thank you so much for our soloist and for our musician who came in with her and accompanied her. I thank each and every one of you for being here. And finally, I want to thank each of you for your attendance at today's events. Your presence lets me know that you have given thought to the need for inclusivity. It is my hope that you will move past thought into a space of intentional action for the purpose of lasting change. Far too often, events like this stir up our thoughts and spirits, only to be later abandoned for the chaos of our everyday lives. Yet, actuation of Dr. King's dreams cannot reside in the status quo. In fact, most of the institutions we engage with on a daily basis are built on oppression. Thus, to achieve an equitable society, we must dismantle the very systems and narratives we have come accustomed to. I'm aware that doing so will cause pushback and even discomfort, yet choosing not to will leave us in a sunken place. And for those who have seen the movie Get Out, you know what the sunken place is. Today, we must admit that our society is not always just. Our world is not always equitable, and that strategic misinformation has left us devoid of accountability. Your charge today is to re-examine yourselves, the systems you engage with, and the narratives that have been given power. I beg of you to use your resources and voices to create transformation. The road won't always be easy, but we must push until we get there. I am foolish enough to believe that there is light at the end of the tunnel of oppression, but we are not there yet. And we will never be there if we choose not to push, if we choose not to do this work, not to be accountable, and not to use our voices, and not to take action. Let's continue our fight for a truly just society. Thank you for attending Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration 2020. Have a great day.